They somehow got their character stuck at this quest and couldn't reload to a previous save for whatever reason. I don't know, just make a save for the player at some point. With the Great Sigil Stone in hand, we've won the battle, and even though there are several other gates as well, I'll assume those were handled by the guys outside and not tied to the Great Gate. Martin tells us he's going to prepare the ritual, and we set off to prepare for the unknown.
I have everything in place for the ritual. I'll open the portal whenever you're ready.
Martin explains that the portal will be one way and speculates that Mankar Cameron is an anchor for the realm and will need to be killed for us to return. The ritual is performed, we head in, and are greeted by Paradise. Paradise represents the possibilities of Oblivion.
Fortnite, you say?
Is unlike anything else
I don't know
in
if that's
Oblivion.
true.
Purple vegetation, a perpetual state of sunset, intact Iliad structures, deer roaming around alongside the Daedra, and constant torture of Mankar's subjects. Mankar also does some narration, becoming aware of us the moment we arrived. We're going to break down Cameron's lines all at once later, just bear in mind we're being narrated to as we progress. Eventually we come across mana bloom plants, which are the only respawning source of ambrosia and lycor in the game, which are both single effect plants that restore health and magicka respectively. The path eventually leads to the Dremora Cathatet. He greets us peacefully, remarking that we destroyed the Sigil Tower at Ganona, or the gate that opened at Kavach. He's got some interesting lines.
Your swift retribution earned you much respect among my people. We had not expected that a mortal would act with such
I'm not fucking.
and honor.
Yeah, 1 second.
It is no dishonor for us to speak. You speak directly, like one of my people almost. I'm glad I did not kill you immediately.
Cathatet offers us a choice. To progress into the Forbidden Grotto, we need the bands of the Chosen. We can fight him for them or earn them through service, as both are honorable. I choose service and we get sent on a short quest to free a trapped Zivile, Anaxes, from some ascended immortals who tracked him in the cave. Free Anaxes, return, and then I reject taking the bands from him.
You are unlike any other mortal I have encountered. You serve me, and then you spurn the reward for your service. Come, as an equal, I shall grace your name and corpse with honor.
Also, you can play Persuasion Pie with Cathatet since Dremora are actually NPCs and not creatures like in Morrowind. And they forgot to give him the flag to prevent persuasion. This also means he has a black soul despite being a Daedra. We head into the grotto, the shackles now stuck on preventing our escape. After some Daedra killing, we meet Eldamil, a delusioned Mankar worshipper who will help us with our situation by getting us past the Dremora Overseer. He removes our shackles and comes with us to fight with Mankar. Finally, we've reached the moment where we reveal what this game is truly about.
Yeah, dude, the voices in the Bethesda games sound so bad. This is an insane role.
Blowing a giant stack of cash so you can wrangle up Patrick Stewart, who is in the prime of his fame from Star Trek The Next Generation, and the TNG movies, I guess, so that he can be a voice in the trailer and have 10 minutes of screen time is one thing. Hiring Sean Bean, who had a prominent role in The Lord of the Rings, a movie so significant to fantasy, and then having Sean Bean voice the protagonist of your main quest for the entire game is another. Hell, that makes Terrence Stamp's cameo as Mankar Cameron almost insignificant. Still, it's the voice recording session that the Making of Oblivion documentary showed off, with Todd Howard flying out to London personally to get the lines.
Neil Todd.
You gotta put that in.
Smile.
Oh yeah, that's a Neumann U87 microphone, one of the best and most expensive microphones money can buy. Granted, they would have been renting time in a recording studio, just thought I would point it out. As someone who spent a lot of money on microphones, thanks patrons. Given that Cameron is the game's principal antagonist, one would hope Bethesda would have learned from Morrowind's antagonist, Dagoth-Ur. Dagoth-Ur had a compelling conversation, but most of the time his presence in the main quest proper came in the form of his servants and a few text-based dreams. And Dagoth-Ur proper lacked any substantial screen time until the conclusion of Morrowind's main quest. Cameron corrects this, using that celebrity voice talent to appear a single time in the main quest before our arrival in Paradise, where he doesn't acknowledge the player. The difference, though, is that we get a generally good idea of who Dagoth-Ur is before we ever meet him. Until the time came that I generally had to write about Mankar Cameron, I couldn't have really told you much about him. For instance, we know that Dagoth-Ur was the one who reported the Dwemer's plans to create Numidium, effectively starting the series of events that led to their disappearance. Dagoth-Ur was entrusted with the Heart of Lorkhan, and the various claims of what happened after that are a big part of Morrowind's story. Mankar, on the other hand, Well, for a long time I just assumed that Mankar Cameron was a former Ayleid king who, after the rise of men, spent a couple thousand years coming up with a plot to eventually overthrow the Septim Empire and bring Tamriel under Elvish domination again. All of that is information I assumed based on the Ayleid architecture of Paradise and because the quest involves Senker Tor, which was a significant place in Cyrodiilic lore. As we complete Martin's tasks, he'll gradually accumulate literature on his desk that is relevant to the plot. One of these books is titled The Refugees, which is a light armor skill book that can only be found here and at the first edition bookstore from earlier in the main quest when we were getting the commentaries. The book details the birth of Mankar Cameron and constitutes the bulk of his lore page. Mankar was born to a Bosmeri refugee, whom as the story progresses is revealed to have been the mistress to Haemon Cameron, who had been a primary instigator in a massive civil war that embroiled Valenwood, Colovia, Hammerfell, and High Rock. So remember when Tarmina said the commentaries of the Mysterium Xarxes were contemporary with Tiber Septim? Not the Xarxes itself, she specifies the commentaries.
The commentaries are contemporary with Tiber Septim, over 400 years ago, so he is unlikely to still be alive, although you never know.
Okay, well, the Pocket Guide to the Empire, 3rd edition, which physically came with Oblivion's Collector's Edition, has a section on Valenwood which dates the war with the Cameron usurper to the 3rd era, year 249. That means that not only was Mankar born far after the establishment of the Septim dynasty, but that his birth is closer to the current year than it is to the death of Tiber Septim. You can almost say this is intentional, seeing as the Arcane University's expert, which in turn likely means Tamriel's expert, in Daedric Cults didn't make the connection that the Mankar Cameron who wrote these commentaries was the same Mankar Cameron of this book. But we can forgive that. Again, Oblivion's world isn't to scale and doesn't have the internet, moth priests, so such a connection could easily go unnoticed.
Hi.
However, it's important to mention that in Elder Scrolls,
It'll be a pretty short
down
stream.
via the mother, which is detailed in Notes on Racial Phylogeny. And given that Mankar's mother was a
I've
Bosmer
just
and
been
Mankar clearly isn't, something's
invited
wrong.
to do something.
If anything, given that Mankar doesn't mention his
Oh, one
legacy
second.
and that the story doesn't draw attention to this book despite its placement in main quest areas, I believe the refugees to be a possible red herring. Although again, there are several similarities between Mankar and the Heart King stories that make that difficult to believe. This is where I start to say words like portonymic and neonymic and a bunch of high lore concepts to dance around the fact that someone made a fucky wucky and said the commentaries are older than they should be and that Mankar's the wrong race. Why does Mankar live in an Ayleid building? Because he used Nimic surgery to change himself into an Ayleid and make himself Dragonborn.
Is the audio still good? I haven't. I think I messed with it
this?
since last
Because
time.
Mehrunes Dagon taught him how to use Mehrunes Razor to open the construction set and do a race edit. All of this is in the lore. You can read about it in the trial of oh no, wait, that was a forum post, not in the games. I mean, it is canon if you manage to beat Battlespire, since they had to invent some bullshit to make it possible to defeat Mehrunes Dagon at the end. Talk about nonsense, justifying a mistake by referencing a lore argument that happens in a game a grand total of like 17 people ever beat. Hey, if it's as easy as saying Mehrunes Dagon base and reference ID, then how come we're bothering to go to Paradise and all and not just waiting for him to turn up so we can say the magic words and make him disappear? I guess that would be pretty anticlimactic after all, so maybe it's better if we leave the Nimic surgery stuff out. Look at it like this. There is zero, and I mean absolutely zero, story benefits to having Mankar Cameron be the son of Haemon Cameron beyond being able to draw a lore connection to Daggerfall, I guess. Instead, let's redraft this. First fix, just make him a Bosmer. You might say, that looks silly. But given the number of people who swear by Fargoth-Ur, I would argue that having the main villain be a Bosmer
I have no idea
would
what the
actually
fuck
be
this
the
guy's
best thing that
talking
happened
about.
to the Wood Elves, since it would help uplift that race out of perpetual meme status. Second proposal. This is now Mankar Cameron, last king of the Ayleids. His bloodline was the first of the Dragonborn to wear the Amulet of Kings before Alesia stole it, and later history was revised to claim that she was the originator. Mankar was born in the final days of the Ayleids' presence on Cyrodiil, near the end of the Second Era when Tiber Septim finally extinguished their culture completely. As a young man, he ventured through Tamriel, experiencing the various cultures of the elves, and realized that Merrick culture could potentially be unified through a mutual hatred of Talos. The upper echelon of the Mythic Dawn would be committed to the reversal of Lorkhan's scheme to create mortality, effectively restoring the world to its primordial
this is
and
really
timeless
good.
state. By the time the men of the Mythic Dawn realized what was happening, they would arrive in Paradise where they would be perpetually tormented in order to maintain a purity of rank. In essence, the Mythic Dawn would become the genesis of the Thalmor, except without Mankar, it becomes about an Altmeri dominion over Tamriel instead of the restoration of Ayleid culture. You could even link it to several conspiracies to create elvish superpowers, such as Dunmer Mythic Dawn members awakening Dagoth Ur, or playing a part in the fall of Dagoth Ur and by extension the Tribunal, returning the Dunmer to Daedra worship. How about the Mythic Dawn propping up the Necromancer cult and creating an elvish replacement for Archay and Mannimarco while at the same time undermining the Empire's Mages Guild? You don't have to use all of those ideas, but making Mankar an actual Ayleid king would resolve several of the issues. Of course, the biggest issue with this is giving Terrence Stamp more lines, and that means paying him more money. According to Michael Kirkbride, Mankar's speech came from an email where he was just writing dialogue to help with his work on the commentaries, and Todd Howard ended up using it as dialogue on short notice, which is why Mankar gets several details wrong. His line,
"Many are their names and the names of their masters. The cold harbor of Meridian, Periite's quagmire, the 10 moon shadows of Mythala, and..."
he attributes the wrong Plains of Oblivion to the wrong Daedric princes, because Mankar's wrong in some respects. People have used this to easily and smugly discount his entire thesis. Let's at least listen to what he has to say.
So, the cat's paw of the Septims arrives at last. You didn't think you could take me unawares, here of all places, in the paradise that I created. Look now upon my paradise. Gaia Alata in the old tongue, a vision of the past and the future. Behold the savage garden, where my disciples are tempered for a higher destiny, to rule over Tamriel Reborn. How little you understand. You cannot stop Lord Dagon. The principalities have sparkled as gems in the black reaches of oblivion since the first morning. Many are their names and the names of their masters. The cold harbor of Meridian, Periite's quagmire, the 10 moon shadows of Mythala, and Dawn's beauty, the princedom of Lorkhon, misnamed Tamriel by deluded mortals. Yes, you understand now. Tamriel is just one more Daedric realm of oblivion, long since lost to its prince when he was betrayed by those that served him. Lord Dagon cannot invade Tamriel, his birthright. He comes to liberate the occupied lands. Ask yourself, how is it that mighty gods die, yet the Daedra stand incorruptible? How is it that the Daedra forthrightly proclaim themselves to man, while the gods cower behind statues and the faithless words of traitor priests? It is simple. They are not gods at all. The truth has been in front of you since you first were born. The Daedra are the true gods of this universe. Julianos, Dibella, and Stondar are all Lorkhan's betrayers, posing as divinities in the principality that has lost its guiding light. What are night and destruction? The gods you worship are trifling shadows of first causes. They have tricked you for ages. Why do you think your world has always been contested ground, the arena of powers and immortals? It is Tamriel, the realm of change, brother to madness, sister to deceit. Your false gods could not entirely rewrite history. Thus you remember tales of Lorkhan vilified, a dead trickster whose heart came to Tamriel. But if a god can die, how does his heart survive? He is Daedroth, Tamriel I Daedroth. This heart is the heart of the world, for one was made to satisfy the other. You all remember this. It is in every legend. Daedra cannot die. So your so-called gods cannot erase him from your minds completely. Well done, champion. Your progress is swift and sure. Perhaps you will reach me after all. You think I mock you? Not at all. In your coming, I hear the footsteps of fate. You are the last defender of decadent Tamriel. I am the midwife of the mythic dawn, Tamriel Reborn. I welcome you. If you truly are the agent. I tire of the self-styled heroes who set themselves in my path only to prove unworthy in the event. I have waited a long time for you, champion of old Tamriel. You were the last gasp of a dying age. You breathed the stale air of false hope. How little you understand. You cannot stop Lord Dagon. The walls between our worlds are crumbling. The mythic dawn grows nearer with every rift in the firmament. Very soon, the lines now blurred will be erased. Tamriel and Oblivion rejoined. The mythic age reborn. Lord Dagon shall walk Tamriel again. The world shall be remade. The new age shall rise from the ashes of the old. My vision shall be realized. Weakness will be purged from the world, and mortal and immortal alike purified in the refiner's fire. My long duel with the Septims is over, and I have the mastery. The Emperor is dead. The Amulet of Kings is mine. And the last defender of the last ragged Septim stands before me in the heart of my power. Let us see who at last has proved the stronger.
Got all that? All of that had to have gone through an editor because, when compared to the commentaries, it's at least comprehensible. As to his theories, in my eyes, it's not entirely improbable, but also likely not accurate. Lorcan isn't really a Daedra. It's more that he defies classification because he died before the difference in Aedra and Daedra even existed. Assuming he didn't die, then he would be a Daedra, but that would also mean that Lorcan would be around somewhere and that Mehrunes' plan to conquer Tamriel is an act of liberation, even though, arguably, Lorcan doesn't need liberation, as this may well be his intended outcome. In any event, it's impossible to ignore Mehrunes Dagon as a party in this story. Now, we could put off a discussion of Mehrunes Dagon until he shows up in the final quest, but let's not. Mehrunes Dagon. I mean, look at the guy. What other impressions could you possibly have about him? His visual design goes back to Battlespire, and Morrowind would add many of the more demonic details to his character, but it was Oblivion that decided to make him bright red, 50 feet tall, and filled his plane with obvious hell symbolism. A layperson who doesn't know Elder Scrolls takes one look at this character and assumes everything there is to know about him. But what if I told you that I was about to blow your mind? That I could recontextualize everything about the story, and that I've come to the conclusion that people have been sleeping on Oblivion's main quest being one of the best quest lines in Howard's Elder Scrolls. Don't believe me? Mehrunes Dagon set Mankar Cameron up for failure. In fact, his goal was never to successfully invade Tamriel or to install a new empire, and even better, Mehrunes Dagon got his desired outcome. Again, a normal person looks at Mehrunes Dagon and sees Satan. No, not even that Satan, this Satan.
Hey, Satan.
The comical Satan that somehow has the power to stand against God and who is endeavoring in every aspect of life to undermine the good morals of honest Americans. This gets into actual religious lore, so I'll try to keep it brief. In the Bible, God tells a guy to not go back to a city. This is Old Testament, where God was a lot more hands-on. God ends up sending an angel to Earth to stop this guy who doesn't immediately see the angel and needs his ass to tell him to shape up in the presence of divinity. Satan essentially starts his presence in the Bible as an agent of God, and later in the story powered up from blocking asses to delivering a plague to punish David. Obviously, the writers have realized that having God himself do these terrible things is bad for the moral of the story, and so are using Satan as a character to divorce God from the things God is doing. This trend continues into the story of Job. Now, Satan isn't referred directly by name, rather the word Satan is used to describe the role the angel is playing in these stories. In the story of Job, however, he refers to this character effectively using Satan as a title, and Satan tells him that he's been roaming the realms of
I feel like this cannot possibly be relevant to Oblivion.
Evil, where he destroys Job's life under the pretense that even as a devotee of God, Job will abandon his faith. If you've ever wondered why it's called a job, read this story. Funny thing is, right? Yahweh's basically letting Satan run a train on this poor guy's life just to prove how much of a loser incel Satan is, which is a pretty good indicator of where the mentality of the writer's room was at this point in the series. It didn't help that Zoroastrianism started influencing the writers, and suddenly the angels were having human temptations. Probably without realizing it, they had effectively implied that by sheer contact with humans, these angels were being turned to sin. This set a bad precedent that the splinter religions and their fanfictions would take into full effect. Satan's characterization would take a ramp up in the New Testament after the property changed hands. His retconning story was that Satan was a fallen angel and now a tempter to the ways of evil. This poor guy who started as an angel just trying to do his job and stop a guy from disobeying God is now trying to trick Jesus Christ himself into sin so that he can prove once and for all that he is not in fact an incel loser. This whole character arc screams unplanned writing and would have been better handled if there was a clear moment for Satan's character where he actually fell from grace and that explained why he was so resolute on trying to prove God wrong. or establishing any kind of stakes to power that would make it so that God couldn't just immediately erase his character from existence at the first sign of backsass. Satan's poor character writing, with many of the same flaws as Judas' character writing, led to over a millennia of reinterpretation and fanfiction. Are the kids being bad? Tell them that Satan will snatch them in the woods. Are the adults not donating 10% of their income like good Christians? Tell them that Satan will fuck their ass in hell. It's not necessarily the fault of the believers that they use Satan like this, considering the precedent was set all the way back in the story of Job. I mean, if the main point of your story is that anyone is capable of receiving the Lord's forgiveness, then surely Satan's pretty high up on the list of characters deserving a redemption arc. In any event, popular culture first obsessed with Satan as a figure who represented evil, and then as an example of where you'll end up if you are evil, but at some point the message got corrupted and became this confusing modern narrative that Satan is the Lord of Hell. Which leads us to Bethesda, who, in an effort to make a story about good versus evil, abandoned all pretense entirely and converted one of their Daedric princes into the pop culture icon of Satan, complete with religious revisionism. So let's strip that back. Mehrunes Dagon's only real presence in the game is as the antagonist of the main quest. Some people like to point out the Mehrunes Razor plugin, although since you can't sacrifice the Razor and there isn't much lore about Dagon in the DLC, it's not really relevant. The first piece we have is the Mysterium Xarxes, a book directly written by Mehrunes Dagon himself. Martin indicates the book is dangerous to read without magical protection, but really it's unclear if he means the book has the power to corrupt its reader or if the book contains information that inevitably corrupts its reader. That might seem like minutia, but that second detail is important if you consider that Mehrunes Dagon is the Daedric Prince of Destruction and Revolution. The book may well contain some inevitable truths that would push even the most devout person down the wrong path. It's possible that there isn't anything actually written in the book until it is opened, at which point it's filled with whatever truth is necessary to sway the reader. A mimetic truth that changes its meaning to fit the reader. The thing is, Martin seems to have far too easy a time deciphering the Xarxes to recreate the ritual to open a portal to paradise. My argument is this. Mehrunes Dagon wanted Martin to complete the ritual, for the player to kill Mankar, and for Martin to then die at the Temple of the One. Why? Mankar did not want to change the status quo of Tamriel. Not really. He was more so advocating that the Septim Empire be replaced with a Cameron Empire. A beneficial position to be in when the world reverts to the Mythic Age, to be sure. Mehrunes doesn't really want that, and as Jesus pointed out to Satan, why would you give someone the power that you know is going to usurp you? At the same time, Mehrunes Dagon has no interest in installing another Septim to the throne, especially given his involvement with the other Septim Emperors. Instead, neither party got the throne. The Septim dynasty fell and Tamriel returned to a state where conflict plagued the land. However, it's important to note that being the Prince of Revolution is not being the Prince of Chaos. If that were the case, then Mehrunes would absolutely have gone for the plan to restore the Mythic Age, even if it meant getting stuck with a prick like Mankar. The thing about Revolution is that it requires a sense of linear time. In some respects, Mehrunes Dagon couldn't really exist as he truly is without Lorkhan's plan. So Mehrunes used Mankar's ambition as a ploy to host his own revolution against the Septim dynasty, and then when Mankar Cameron held the upper hand, used the player's tenacity as a ploy to host a revolution against the Mythic Dawn. After we return from Paradise, we take the amulet to the Imperial City and try to light the Dragonfires, only to find that Mehrunes Dagon and the forces of Oblivion have invaded en masse. However, if you look at the actual game files, Mankar Cameron's death actually marks a point where the gates slowed down the rate at which they open. This isn't communicated to the player directly, but the percentage chance of a gate opening at a spot is determined by a variable, the chance raising and lowering based on the events of the quests. But why? If the Dragonfires being unlit is impetus enough for the Daedra to invade, then surely Mehrunes Dagon would have just turned up and destroyed the city by now. At the very least, you would think that he would destroy the Temple of the One to straight up game over the Empire. The answer is that this is all going according to Mehrunes Dagon's extremely convoluted plan. Being the Prince of Destruction is all well and good until you've won and realize that there isn't anyone around to build things for you to destroy. Just like how Mehrunes isn't going to work towards putting someone in power that would try to prevent him from throwing a revolution, Mehrunes is also motivated to pull back at the last moment from winning so that the world can recover and ripen up fresh for another destruction in the future. But why then would Mehrunes effectively be responsible for permanently closing the door to future invasions? Well, we'll talk about that more when we discuss Martin's character. For now, I want to show you Mehrunes Dagon's most loyal servant, Eldamil. Eldamil does have a line about making prayers to Akatosh, but that's a red herring. The Divines generally don't work in such direct ways, and given the timeline Eldamil gives us, it's fair to say that we were probably on our way here long before Eldamil started praying. See, we have to answer the question of why all these loyal subjects of the Mythic Dawn are being tortured. At base value, we take it as Marion and Mankar being evil
thank you to the
or that they're
probably no one who is currently here watching. I'll stream later.